There is a reason this day feels different before it has even fully begun. And if you've been sensing an unusual pressure building beneath the surface of your emotions, this message is going to explain why. May 10th, 2026 is not unfolding like an ordinary Saturday, even if the outside world continues moving as though nothing significant is happening. While most people are distracted by routines, entertainment, and temporary concerns, something far more precise is taking shape above them. The sky is arranging a sequence of energetic openings so rare that many people will move through this entire weekend without realizing they were standing directly in front of one of the most important manifestation thresholds of the year. But you are not meant to overlook it. You are meant to recognize it. What is happening now is not accidental timing or spiritual coincidence. It is alignment with purpose. The Sun and Jupiter are moving into an exact sextile at 20 degrees, forming a 60-degree connection that astrologers have long associated with opportunity, acceleration, expansion, and divine momentum. Yet this alignment carries even more weight because Jupiter is currently traveling through Cancer, the sign where its energy becomes amplified to its highest expression. In astrology, this is called exaltation, a condition where a planet operates with extraordinary strength and clarity. It is as if the universe has placed the most abundant force in the sky into the exact emotional environment where it can express itself without restriction. And that matters more than you realize, because this is not simply external luck arriving out of nowhere. This is emotional destiny beginning to organize itself around the choices you have been making internally. If you have recently felt unexpected thoughts rising around your home life, your future stability, your emotional security, your family patterns, or even your relationship with success itself, that is not your imagination wandering. Something inside you has already started responding to the shift before your conscious mind could fully understand it. Part of you already knows change is approaching. Part of you can feel the pressure of a new timeline attempting to enter your life. But what makes these next 24 hours so powerful is not only the Sun and Jupiter sextile. The deeper truth is that today contains 3 separate energetic thresholds unfolding within the same cycle. 3 distinct openings that demand awareness, honesty, and participation. Some spiritual traditions describe moments like this as a 3-doors portal, a sequence where each energetic gate prepares you for the next stage of transformation. And what makes this especially intense is that these doors are not passive. They require movement from you. They require recognition. If you understand what each threshold is asking you to release, confront, or embrace, the energy surrounding this day could accelerate manifestations that have felt delayed for years. But if you move through this day unconsciously, emotionally numb, or spiritually disconnected, you may later look back wondering why everything around you suddenly began advancing, while your own life remained frozen in old cycles. Because this energy does not linger forever. It opens, it activates, and then it moves. The truth is, the universe has been preparing you for this moment long before today arrived. Think about this past week carefully. It has not felt emotionally neutral, has it? Something has been stirring beneath ordinary life, something difficult to explain, yet impossible to fully ignore. The process truly intensified around May 1st, during the Scorpio full moon, when emotions that had been buried beneath distraction and survival suddenly rose to the surface with overwhelming force. Conversations became heavier. Old wounds resurfaced. Hidden truths became impossible to avoid. Many people felt emotionally exposed without understanding why. But that Scorpio full moon was never meant to comfort you. It was meant to clear you. Scorpio energy strips away denial. It forces confrontation with what has been suppressed, hidden, feared, or emotionally avoided. That lunation acted like a spiritual excavation, pulling unresolved material from the depths of the psyche, so it could no longer silently control your future from the shadows. Then came May 6th, when Pluto stationed retrograde, and the atmosphere shifted even deeper inward. Pluto does not create surface-level change. Pluto transforms through destruction, exposure, and psychological rebirth. Since that retrograde began, many people have found themselves confronting strange dreams, old memories, fears they thought they had already healed, or uncomfortable realizations about power, identity, and control. It may have felt as though life itself was forcing you to look directly at the parts of yourself you normally keep hidden from the world. But this was not punishment, it was preparation. Because the abundance connected to today cannot fully enter a person who is still emotionally chained to outdated identities. Expansion requires space. Growth requires release. The universe cannot place a new future into hands that are still gripping the remains of an expired version of themselves. Then yesterday, on May 9th, the last quarter moon in Aquarius brought another layer of tension into the collective atmosphere. That transit created what astrologers often describe as a crisis in consciousness, a moment where emotional discomfort forces awareness. You may have suddenly realized certain friendships no longer resonate. You may have felt detached from social expectations you once followed automatically. You may have sensed an urgent need to separate from old belief systems, environments, or emotional patterns that no longer reflect who you are becoming. Aquarius energy demands liberation from outdated structures, even when that liberation initially feels lonely or uncertain. And that discomfort was not arriving to destabilize you. It was arriving to create room. Everything unfolding over the past several days has been leading directly into this moment. The emotional purge of Scorpio, the shadow excavation of Pluto retrograde, the psychological release initiated by the Aquarius moon, all of it has been preparing your inner world for expansion. None of those experiences were interruptions to your progress. They were the conditions required before this next doorway could fully open. Because the energy arriving now needs honesty. It needs emotional clarity. It needs alignment between your spirit and your choices. Opportunities this powerful cannot root themselves inside emotional chaos and internal contradiction. They need openness. They need readiness. And now the first threshold begins to reveal itself. Early this morning, before much of the world was even awake enough to notice the atmosphere changing, the first energetic door started opening through a trioctile between Jupiter in Cancer and the North Node in Pisces, forming a 135-degree connection filled with karmic pressure and spiritual adjustment. And this is where the energy becomes deeply personal. The North Node is not just another astrological point drifting through the chart. It represents the direction your soul is attempting to evolve toward during this lifetime. It symbolizes the unfamiliar path your spirit knows. It must eventually walk, even when fear, comfort, or old conditioning tries to pull you backward. The North Node in Pisces asks for surrender, intuition, faith, emotional truth, and spiritual trust. But Jupiter magnifies whatever it touches. So when Jupiter reaches toward the North Node from Cancer, emotions intensify around destiny itself. Suddenly, you begin feeling the difference between the life you have been surviving and the life you are actually meant to live. And for many people, that realization becomes impossible to ignore. Most people misunderstand what destiny actually feels like when it begins rearranging a life. They assume alignment should feel comfortable, obvious, or immediately reassuring. But real transformation rarely arrives that way. Real transformation usually begins with tension. It begins with the uncomfortable realization that the version of safety you have been protecting may no longer be capable of carrying you into the future waiting for you. And that is exactly what this first energetic threshold is exposing today. This moment is not asking what feels familiar. It is asking what has the power to evolve you. Because when Jupiter, the planet connected to expansion, belief systems, meaning, and higher wisdom, creates a challenging interaction with the North Node in Pisces. Something inside the human spirit reaches a crossroads. A deep internal conflict begins surfacing between the life that feels emotionally secure and the life your soul secretly knows it was meant to pursue. And this conflict can feel intensely personal. One side of you wants certainty. It wants stability, predictable outcomes, financial protection, emotional reassurance, and the comfort of remaining inside structures that feel manageable. But another side of you, the quieter side that has been growing beneath the surface for months, no longer wants to live only for protection. That part wants truth. It wants expansion. It wants spiritual honesty. It wants a life connected to something larger than fear, performance, or survival. The North Node in Pisces does not lead people toward control. It leads them towards surrender, intuition, compassion, spiritual trust, and the dissolution of old ego identities that were built around self-preservation. And when Jupiter presses against that point from Cancer, the emotional pressure intensifies around every desire you have been carrying. Suddenly, you begin questioning why you truly want the things you want. Is your pursuit of success connected to genuine purpose, or is it secretly rooted in fear of instability? Is your desire for recognition coming from authentic expression, or from a need to prove your worth to people who never fully saw you? Is your vision for the future aligned with your soul, or is it built entirely around avoiding discomfort? These are the kinds of questions this first doorway forces into the light. And what makes this transit so emotionally difficult is that it exposes the hidden emotional motivations beneath ambition itself. If your goals are connected to scarcity, insecurity, emotional emptiness, or external validation, this energy will create friction inside you. You may wake up this morning feeling unsettled without fully understanding why. Something may feel slightly off. You may feel emotionally pulled in opposite directions, one part of you craving safety, while another part feels desperate for liberation. And this is not confusion without purpose. This is a karmic adjustment taking place in real time. The universe is showing you where your desires are aligned with your evolution and where they are still tied to fear-based thinking. Because abundance that is built on fear cannot sustain itself. Success that exists only to fill emotional voids eventually collapses under its own emptiness. And deep down, your spirit already knows that. But if you're willing to face this honestly today, something powerful begins shifting. If you allow your material ambitions to reconnect with your spiritual truth instead of separating the two, the tension begins transforming into momentum. The emotional friction that once felt overwhelming suddenly becomes clarity. You stop chasing things that only looked valuable from a wounded perspective. You begin recognizing what actually nourishes your future instead of temporarily soothing your anxiety. And once that adjustment happens internally, the first doorway opens wider than you expected. What originally felt like pressure becomes direction. What felt like emotional conflict becomes alignment. And this is where most people miss one of the most important hidden patterns operating beneath today's astrology. Before the second energetic threshold fully opens, there is another layer unfolding quietly behind the scenes. The Sun is currently traveling through Taurus, a sign connected to stability, value, embodiment, and material manifestation. But Taurus is ruled by Venus, and Venus is not positioned in a quiet or passive placement right now. Venus is moving through Gemini, a sign associated with communication, information exchange, language, networking, curiosity, and mental movement. And this changes everything about how today's opportunities arrive. Many people are still expecting abundance to appear through old structures, rigid systems, or predictable pathways. But that is not how this energy operates. The breakthroughs connected to this transit are moving through communication itself, through conversations, through shared ideas, through messages sent at the right moment, through connections formed unexpectedly, through the courage to articulate something that has been sitting unspoken inside you for far too long. This is the hidden mechanism beneath today's portal. Your voice carries unusual power right now. The words you choose today can alter future timelines more than you realize. The project you have hesitated to begin, the person you have felt called to contact, the idea you have repeatedly pushed aside, the truth you have been afraid to express. All of these are directly connected to the energetic opportunities trying to reach you now. Because under Venus in Gemini, communication becomes currency. Expression becomes magnetism. The ability to clearly communicate your vision becomes the bridge between where you are and where you are trying to go. And if you have recently felt an almost persistent urge to reach outward, to finally speak, create, share, connect, or initiate something intellectually meaningful, that feeling is not random. The universe is arranging circumstances where your ideas can become the catalyst for material change. But only if you stop silencing yourself out of fear of rejection or imperfection. Then the atmosphere shifts again. Shortly after midday, on May 10th, the second energetic threshold begins opening, and this doorway operates on an entirely different level from the first. Earlier, the focus was alignment between your ambitions and your soul. But this next phase moves far deeper into intuition, emotion, and spiritual sensitivity. The moon enters Pisces, and the emotional field surrounding the collective transforms almost immediately. Because the moon governs emotional perception, subconscious responses, and inner instinct, it also rules Cancer, meaning it directly influences the energetic expression of exalted Jupiter, currently sitting there with amplified strength. The moment the moon enters Pisces, logic stops dominating the atmosphere. Something softer but infinitely more intuitive begins taking over. Pisces is the most spiritually porous sign in the zodiac. It governs dreams, psychic impressions, symbolic communication, emotional merging, spiritual downloads, imagination, and the invisible realms beneath ordinary perception. Under this transit, the barrier between the conscious and unconscious mind becomes astonishingly thin. Intuition no longer whispers quietly from the background. It begins speaking directly. And now you understand why certain feelings have been following you lately. That strange pull you could not logically explain. That subtle certainty that something important is approaching. That emotional sensation that your life is somehow standing on the edge of change, even before physical evidence appears. None of that was imagined. The moon, entering Pisces, is activating your deeper knowing. Your higher self has already sensed movement before your conscious mind could organize it into language. But this second doorway demands something extremely difficult from people who are used to surviving through control. It requires surrender, not passive helplessness, but spiritual trust. You cannot overthink your way through this threshold. You cannot force certainty through analysis. You cannot calculate every step before moving. In fact, the harder you attempt to intellectually dominate this energy, the more disconnected you become from it. And for many people, that will feel deeply uncomfortable, especially if you have built your identity around planning ahead, predicting outcomes, and maintaining emotional control. But today, especially throughout the afternoon, control becomes the very thing blocking your clarity. Because the guidance arriving through Pisces energy does not always appear logical at first. It arrives through feelings, synchronicities, intuitive nudges, emotional resonance, dreams, symbolic encounters, and sudden internal knowing that defies ordinary explanation. Opportunities may appear in ways that make no practical sense according to your previous timeline. You may feel called towards something before you fully understand why. And if you reject those instincts simply because they cannot yet be logically proven, you may close yourself off from the exact pathway trying to open for you. This second doorway is not asking you to understand everything before moving forward. It is asking whether you are finally willing to trust what your soul has been trying to tell you all along. Do not dismiss what begins surfacing between 1 and 3 in the afternoon today, because this particular window carries far more significance than it appears to on the surface. The atmosphere during these hours is unusually porous, emotionally charged, and spiritually receptive. Thoughts may enter your mind suddenly without warning. Random memories may return with strange emotional intensity. You may drift into brief daydreams that feel unusually vivid, symbolic, or emotionally real. Certain phrases, images, songs, conversations, or intuitive impressions may arrive with a weight that feels impossible to explain logically. And the mistake most people will make is assuming these moments are meaningless background noise. They are not. Under the moon moving through Pisces, while the larger energetic portal of the day remains active, your conscious mind is no longer the primary receiver of information. Something deeper is opening. The rational filters that normally separate intuition from awareness begin weakening, allowing messages to move directly into your emotional and spiritual perception. What arrives during this period is not random mental wandering. It is guidance bypassing logic entirely. It is your higher awareness communicating in the only language the soul has ever truly trusted: symbols, emotions, sensations, resonance, and inner knowing. And because modern life has conditioned people to distrust intuition unless it can immediately be explained, many individuals will ignore the exact insights capable of altering their future. But you cannot afford to do that today. If a realization suddenly enters your mind, write it down. If an image repeats itself internally, pay attention to it. If you feel emotionally pulled toward an idea, a place, a memory, or a decision that does not yet make complete sense, do not immediately dismiss it simply because logic cannot fully organize it yet. The purpose of this window is not instant understanding. The purpose is reception. Because what enters your awareness between 1 and 3 this afternoon has the potential to become the energetic blueprint for what begins physically manifesting over the coming weeks. And there is another layer hidden inside today's astrology that most people never even think to examine. Both the Sun and Jupiter are positioned at 20 degrees within their respective signs, which in Sabian symbolism translates into the 21st degree imagery. And when these symbolic degrees are studied together, they reveal an astonishing narrative about the process unfolding inside your life right now. The 21st degree of Taurus carries the image of a finger pointing toward a specific line inside an open book. This symbol has long been associated with divine instruction, sacred guidance, and the mysterious phenomenon of receiving answers through synchronicity. It reflects the ancient idea that the universe communicates constantly through symbols, timing, meaningful coincidences, and unexpected moments of recognition. This degree is teaching you to stop assuming reality is silent. Because it is not silent. The universe has been trying to guide you repeatedly, but most of the time the guidance arrives subtly through patterns, emotional reactions repeated, encounters, intuitive nudges, and symbolic events that seem ordinary until you finally recognize the deeper connection between them. Under this energy, you are being asked to develop the ability to read your own life differently, to stop seeing synchronicity as coincidence, to stop dismissing intuitive timing as imagination, to realize that your soul has always been in dialogue with something greater, even during the periods when you felt abandoned, disconnected, or uncertain about your path. But then, the 21st degree of Cancer introduces the second image, and suddenly the deeper meaning of today becomes unmistakable. This degree shows a celebrated opera singer demonstrating extraordinary mastery during a performance before an audience. The symbolism here is not passive inspiration. It is embodiment. It is the image of someone who spent years refining their gifts privately and is now being called to express them publicly with confidence, emotional vulnerability, and full visibility. And when these two Sabian images are placed together, a powerful pattern emerges. First comes the instruction. First comes the message, the intuition, the symbolic guidance, the emotional realization, the inner download. But receiving the message is not the final step. The second step is expression. The second step is having the courage to bring what you have received into visible reality, to speak it, to create it, to embody it, to share it, to stop hiding your gifts out of fear that they are not enough. Today is not only about attracting abundance or waiting for luck to magically appear. It is about receiving direction and then becoming brave enough to act on it openly. The universe may place the script into your hands, but it cannot force you to step onto the stage. That decision belongs entirely to you, and this becomes even more important as the evening approaches and the strongest moment of the entire portal finally arrives. At 10:15 tonight, the Sun and Jupiter perfect their exact sextile at 20 degrees and 25 minutes, opening the energetic doorway to its absolute widest point. This is the climax of the day's astrology. This is the peak transmission. And what makes a sextile different from softer aspects like trines is that a sextile demands conscious participation. A trine flows automatically whether you engage with it or not, but a sextile operates like an invitation. It presents possibility, but it requires action in return. It is the universe arranging conditions, clearing pathways, removing emotional debris, and then waiting to see whether you are finally willing to move. The opportunity exists, but you must choose to meet it halfway. And because Jupiter remains exalted in Cancer during this exact alignment, the abundance connected to this moment is not shallow or temporary. This is not chaotic luck that appears suddenly and disappears just as quickly. Jupiter in Cancer seeks emotional sustainability, long-term security, nourishment, protection, and rooted stability. This energy wants to build something capable of lasting. It wants you to create foundations that support not only external success, but emotional safety as well. This is why today carries extraordinary potential for anything connected to home, family, real estate, emotional healing, generational stability, domestic business opportunities, or creating environments that genuinely support your well-being. If you have been thinking about changing your living situation, improving your home, investing in property, starting a business connected to caregiving or emotional support, or healing painful ancestral patterns that have shaped your relationship with security, tonight's alignment becomes especially powerful. But again, the universe will not force movement. The pathway can open completely and still remain unused if fear keeps you standing still. This energy requires willingness. You must choose the opportunity consciously. You must reach for the life that is reaching toward you. And just when it seems like the day is finally calming down, the third and final threshold begins opening. At 11 tonight, Venus in Gemini forms a trioctile to Pluto, retrograde in Aquarius. And this last doorway is perhaps the most psychologically intense of them all, because it functions as a test of integration. Earlier in the day, the universe opened pathways toward intuition, expansion, communication, and manifestation. But this final transit asks whether you are emotionally capable of sustaining what you have called in. Venus governs love, money, values, attraction, self-worth, and the emotional relationship you have with receiving. Pluto governs power, obsession, control, psychological shadow material, fear, transformation, and the hidden motivations buried deep within the psyche. And when Venus forms a frictional aspect of Pluto during a retrograde cycle, unresolved emotional material immediately rises to the surface, which means the very opportunities, abundance, recognition, or emotional breakthroughs you begin attracting earlier in the day may suddenly activate your deepest insecurities tonight. Fear of failure may surface. fear of visibility may emerge. Fear that you are not worthy of receiving more may intensify unexpectedly. Old emotional wounds connected to rejection, scarcity, betrayal, abandonment, or powerlessness may suddenly become activated. And this is where many people unknowingly sabotage themselves. Because the moment life finally begins opening, the shadow often appears to convince you that you cannot hold what you asked for. What makes this final doorway so intense is that the moment life finally begins opening for you, the subconscious immediately searches for reasons to close it again. The instant something beautiful enters your reality, whether it is love, opportunity, recognition, financial expansion, or emotional fulfillment, another voice often rises beneath the surface, asking questions you did not even realize were living inside you. Do I truly deserve this? What if I lose it? What if I cannot maintain it? What if everything falls apart once people really see me? And this is exactly why the third threshold cannot be avoided. The universe is not only observing whether you are capable of attracting abundance, it is observing whether your nervous system, your emotional patterns, and your inner identity are capable of sustaining it without unconsciously destroying it. Because manifestation is not simply about receiving. It is about holding. It is about whether your internal world has evolved enough to remain open once the blessing actually arrives. And this is where the shadow integration initiated by Venus in Gemini, forming a trioctile to Pluto retrograde in Aquarius, becomes unavoidable. Pluto retrograde drags hidden psychological material into awareness, especially the parts connected to fear, shame, powerlessness, rejection, control, and emotional survival. Venus governs what you value, what you love, how you receive affection, how you relate to money, and how deeply you believe you are worthy of being supported. So when these energies collide through friction, the shadow does not appear randomly. It appears precisely where abundance is trying to enter. For some people, this will emerge through relationships. The moment emotional closeness deepens, fear may suddenly activate. Old patterns around jealousy, emotional control, mistrust, or fear of abandonment may surface with startling intensity. You may feel an instinct to pull away, just as connection begins becoming real. For others, the shadow will manifest through finances and opportunity. A door may open unexpectedly, and instead of excitement, panic begins taking over internally. Thoughts about failure, loss, rejection, or catastrophe start spiraling through the mind. You may suddenly question your qualifications, your readiness, or your ability to succeed. And what makes this dangerous is that unresolved fear has the power to unconsciously reject the exact opportunities you have spent years praying for. Because the subconscious always attempts to recreate what feels emotionally familiar, even when familiarity is painful. If scarcity has been emotionally normalized inside you, abundance can initially feel unsafe. If disappointment has shaped your identity for years, success may trigger anxiety instead of relief. This is why shadow work becomes essential tonight, not as a spiritual trend, but as a survival requirement for the future trying to emerge through you. If these fears remain unconscious, they will sabotage everything the earlier part of this portal attempted to build. The opportunities will begin slipping away, not because the universe removed them, but because unresolved emotional patterns quietly push them away from behind the scenes. And this is the true question hidden inside the third doorway. Are you actually prepared to become powerful? Are you emotionally prepared to be visible? Are you capable of holding love without destroying it through fear? Are you capable of receiving success without shrinking the moment it arrives? Are you capable of carrying abundance without feeling guilty for having it? Because many people believe they want transformation until transformation begins, demanding a new identity from them. Tonight requires radical honesty. You must look directly at the parts of yourself that still feel inadequate. still feel emotionally unsafe. Receiving more, still believe they must suffer in order to deserve love, stability, or recognition. You must confront the hidden belief that abundance belongs to other people, but somehow not to you. And then you must consciously decide whether those beliefs are allowed to continue shaping your future. Because the deeper truth is this: you were never fundamentally unworthy of what you desire. The abundance approaching your life is not asking you to become someone else before receiving it. It is asking you to stop rejecting yourself long enough to finally allow it in. And what makes this even more important is understanding that May 10th is not the conclusion of this energetic process. It is the opening movement of something much larger that continues unfolding throughout the coming week. Most people will misunderstand today completely because they will assume the portal itself is the manifestation. But it is not. Today is preparation. Today is activation. The true planting phase begins on May 16th during the new moon in Taurus, arriving only 6 days after this 3 doors portal. The Taurus new moon becomes the moment where everything emotionally, spiritually, and psychologically revealed today begins taking physical form. If today is the clearing of the field, the new moon is where the seeds are finally planted. If today is the receiving of the blueprint, the new moon becomes the commitment to build from it. Which means the days between May 10th and May 16th matter enormously. You are being given less than a week to process what surfaces emotionally, integrate the lessons revealed through the 3 thresholds, recognize the patterns being exposed, and decide consciously what future you are truly ready to cultivate. Do not move through these days unconsciously. Pay attention to the synchronicities. Observe the conversations that repeat themselves. Notice what opportunities begin opening. Notice what fears become activated. Watch what emotions surface around receiving, visibility, love, security, and success. Because by the time the Taurus new moon arrives, you need clarity about what you are planting into your future. And if you move through this process with awareness, courage, and emotional honesty, the seeds planted during that new moon can grow into realities that feel almost impossible to imagine from where you stand right now. This is how co-creation with the universe actually functions. Not through passive wishing or fantasy, but through conscious participation in energetic timing, emotional alignment, and spiritual readiness. There is also one final layer beneath today's astrology that cannot be ignored. Jupiter moving through Cancer is never only about individual abundance. Cancer governs ancestry, emotional inheritance, lineage, family memory, and the energetic patterns carried through generations, which means the expansion unfolding now reaches beyond you personally. The healing you allow, the abundance you accept, the emotional patterns you transform, all of it ripples backward and forward across your lineage. The work you do internally does not stop with you. It touches those who came before you and those who will come after you. This is one of the deepest meanings behind Jupiter being exalted in Cancer. Cancer understands that human beings are not isolated. We are connected through emotional history, inherited wounds, ancestral resilience, and generational memory. We are living bridges between the past and the future. And when one person in the lineage finally chooses healing, finally chooses abundance without guilt, finally chooses to stop repeating cycles of fear and emotional deprivation, something shifts for the entire family line. So as you move through these 3 thresholds today, remember that you are not walking alone. There are generations behind you that survived enough for you to reach this moment. There are ancestors who dreamed of a future they would never personally see. There are emotional patterns waiting to end through your decisions, which means choosing abundance is not selfish. Choosing healing is not selfish. Choosing visibility is not selfish. It is an act of restoration across time itself. And throughout this day, You will repeatedly encounter small but powerful moments of decision, moments where you must choose between trust and control, between movement and hesitation, between your future and your fear. And what is important to understand is that life-changing choices rarely announce themselves dramatically in real time. Sometimes the decision that changes your entire future looks incredibly small in the moment. Sending the message, returning the call, saying yes when fear tells you to retreat, following an intuitive instinct that cannot yet be logically explained, speaking honestly instead of remaining silent. These quiet moments become turning points because today the energetic conditions surrounding those decisions are unusually activated. The hinges of destiny are moving more easily than usual. The doors are already unlocked. You simply have to decide whether you are willing to walk through them. Most people will not. Most people will feel something shifting internally, but refuse to act until certainty arrives. They will wait for proof, perfect timing, emotional guarantees, or complete understanding before moving forward. And by the time they finally feel ready, the energetic opening will already have passed. Do not let that become your story. Let yourself become the person who trusts the movement before the outcome is fully visible. Let yourself become the person who acts despite uncertainty. Because months from now, or even years from now, you may look back at May 10th, 2026, and suddenly realize that this was the day your entire direction quietly changed. The day you stopped postponing your own evolution. The day you finally chose yourself instead of your fear. The universe is placing 3 doors in front of you today. The question is no longer whether they are real. The only remaining question is whether you are finally ready to walk through them. And if this message reached you at exactly the right time, stay connected. Continue paying attention to what unfolds around you, and allow yourself to remain open to the transformations that are only beginning to reveal themselves now.